The addition is naturally the one that is both understood and accepted by the hearer that the prophet is going to quote from. Missionaries know people are always preached to from their own Bible. To the world to which the English translation of the Book of Mormon was addressed, there was only one acceptable Bible. That's the King James Version, of course. So the Book of Mormon follows that. But no addition or translation of any text is perfect, and the Book of Mormon does not follow the King James Version slavishly by any means. That is a thing which the critics seriously overlook. As long as the King James Version conveys the correct meaning, then the Book of Mormon will follow it. It's naturally the text, but the quotations from it in the Book of Mormon are full of changes. And then Nibley explains some of these changes that I want to go over with you. In Sense Cumorah, on page 113, Nibley notes this. Toward the close of his book, Nephi, of course, quotes Isaiah 48 and chapter 49. Now, this would be a daring thing for an impostor to do to the Bible-reading public if he was producing a forgery. He's throwing his clues all over the place. As Nibley noted, the effort of Joseph Smith is prodigiously clumsy. I like that, prodigiously clumsy. He's not trying to fool anybody here. Nephi identifies who he is quoting. That is simply not plagiarism. I don't care how you look it up. That is not what plagiarism does. The Book of Mormon follows the language of the King James only insofar as it conveys the meaning that Nephi had. Nephi's translation, so far from being a slavish repetition of our Bible, is completely wrong, because when we compare Isaiah 48 and 49 with the Book of Mormon version with the Bible version, hardly any two verses are alike, and there is some serious, significant differences in Isaiah. He says there's a significant difference in Isaiah 48:1 and verse 14 and 49:1 and verse 13. Now, something remarkable occurs at just these 2 points. He says when we compare the Masoretic text of the Bible, that is the Hebrew base, with the Septuagint, that is the Greek Old Testament, again, just 4 verses stand out as being really opposite, really different, I should say. Isaiah 48, verse 1 and verse 14, and Isaiah 49:1 and verse 13. That is, the Book of Mormon conflicts with the King James Bible in the same verses in which the Greek Old Testament Septuagint and the Masoretic Hebrew Old Testament texts conflict. So the Book of Mormon doesn't match the King James, but it does match the ancient Greek version of the Old Testament. That is fascinating, isn't it? Now, he notes on page 114 also, he says, one of the important results of recent Dead Sea Scroll investigations with the Dead Sea Scrolls is the recognition that the text of the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, this was done about in the 3rd century B.C., this opens the door to some very old and valuable texts of the Old Testament that differ quite markedly from the Hebrew Masoretic text. The Book of Mormon differs in exactly the same places and in exactly the same ways. Did Joseph Smith have access to the Greek Septuagint? I have never seen anyone demonstrate that yet. It's an authentic Old Testament connection. That's what Nibley's point is. On page 118, Nibley is describing the idea of the quotations of the Old Testament in the Book of Mormon. This is almost used as proof texts, the way Nephi takes the book of Isaiah and uses it for his own likening, for his own interpretation, for his own situation. This idea wasn't appreciated until the Dead Sea Scrolls came along, and we find ancient Jewish sectaries out there in the desert, the wilderness of Judea. They were doing the same thing. We have the commentary on Nahum and Habakkuk commentary, where they were applying the prophecies of a prophet to their own contemporary situations. They were updating the Scriptures, so to speak. This is a fascinating situation. Their present situation paralleled any situation in Israel's past. This is what is important to know for how the ancient Jews operated with the Scriptures. They were Israel in the wilderness, both in the Old Testament, in the Dead Sea Scrolls ideas, and in the Book of Mormon. With Israel in the wilderness, they received the laws as they dwelt in their tents. The community in arms was the host of heaven overthrowing Belial in the beginning, or the victorious troops of David, or the sons of light overthrowing the sons of darkness in the last great conflict. All of their persecutors were the Kittim. Now, the Dead Sea Scroll scholars were trying to figure out, who are these Kittim? And when you go back through the various journals, it's fascinating how they identified the Greeks with the Kittim, the Romans with the Kittim, the ancient Assyrians with the Kittim. There's many different journals. The Revue de Qumran was one of the big ones. But T.H. Gaster notes, I'm on page 119 of Nibley's text, there's no need to take such references literally. It's quite futile to go casting around among the records of the Hellenistic or the Roman periods or Jewish history for a particular villain. The idea is this is formulaic language. They are the sons of light, and any enemy they have are the sons of darkness. The most important borrowing of the Christians from Qumran, according to A.R.C. Leaney, another Bible scholar, and he's trying to minimize the contact between the Dead Sea Scrolls and the New Testament at all costs. They had a special kind of scriptural exegesis. And what was that? Their particular kind of scriptural explanation, the exegesis, is what they would do is they would interpret their situation as they were experiencing it right then with the light of prophecy through a typological or an allegorical method. This is how the Dead Sea Scrolls Jews functioned. This is precisely what Nephi meant when he said, I did liken all Scripture to our purposes, for our likenesses and our purposes. This Scripture applies to us, and it may not have in the original context, but the Jews later on kept applying these prophecies with the typology and the allegory that it did belong to them. They were interpreting it in light of their life situations. This is arising out of a desire to see prophecy fulfilled in contemporary events. He says this on page 119. Along with that goes the use of proof texts. And what they did, this is all the ancient prophets are called upon to furnish an explanation or an illustration to a present doctrine or to a present situation. This is how the Jews functioned. This is the clue to Isaiah.